Hey everyone, welcome back to Voices in AI with me, Joe and Eldad here, and we're going to be talking about a somewhat controversial figure, I'd say, Sam Harris. He's also an interesting figure, maybe not one you would expect to be in the conversation around AI. He had an interesting beginning where he started off in neuroscience and then had a break and went off into meditation land. I forget where, but somewhere in the East, and went deep into spirituality. Came back and finished his degree and has been a prominent speaker, author, podcaster around a variety of topics, but really focused on morality, ethics, consciousness, the impacts of technology, society. And as I said, has some fairly controversial views, specifically around religion and the religion of Islam in particular.
Mm.
He has been called an Islamophobe for sure. And he has some, I would say, interesting and not consensus focused views on a variety of things. He's very anti-wokism as well. But he has gotten deep into the conversations around AI. He often hosts people in the AI and consciousness space on his podcast, Waking Up. Or actually, I think it's called Making Sense now. They changed it,
Yes.
among other things. But he has definitely been pulled into the sphere of the existential threats around AI. He definitely believes in the other threats, but he is very much concerned. He's also part of the effective altruism movement, which I'm not sure you know about, but generally the idea behind effective altruism is that you want like a scientific altruism in terms of your philanthropy. So you want to be trying to maximize your potential gain in terms of what you're giving. You want to give away a certain percent of your wealth every year. And so that movement has very much aligned itself with the existential threats around AI, because to them, what better way to help humanity flourish than to solve the AI problem, as well as making sure that it doesn't go into the sphere of ending the world potentially.
The sphere, the Terminator.
Yes, the sphere of
Yeah.
the Terminator. So that is Sam in a nutshell. I actually really like listening to Sam. I'm very big on listening to perspectives that I don't agree with, so I can understand the other side and navigate my own feelings around these kinds of things in a what I hope is a beneficial manner. So there's a lot I disagree with Sam, but I really like the way he holds a conversation, the thoughtfulness he puts into it, the reasoning he puts behind it. And there are definitely some gold nuggets from him generally. But if you decide to go and listen to him, be ready to maybe get fired up about a few things he says for sure.
Yeah, he is old school comparison, right? Rush Limbaugh, right? It's that kind of effect, right? You're either going to either be very much agreeing with them or very much not. You don't find someone really in the middle in those scenarios. Similar to you, when you do listen and you're trying to dig out what everybody's got something that they can make a valid point. And I think his, from what I saw in the few things I reviewed, was two things stood out to me. Three things, actually. The first and foremost is speed. We all know how fast times are changing. Moore's Law was not the 18 months it was. Some say it's 15 months now or whatever, right? And if you think what AI is going to do, and in one of the talks, he literally calls it out, right? If you imagine what AI is able to do and what a group of researchers are able to do, AI in a day, let's say in a day, is doing 2,000 hours compared to so if that's continuously happening, the speed of its growth is going to be so much. It's not even a Richter scale kind of thing, right? It's so much faster. How does man keep up with it? Now, along those lines, what he points out really, really nicely is he says AI is very good at answering questions about World War II, right? But if you read Churchill, you're going to get a much more intimate perspective and almost more truth out of that than just going through what the AI is, your questions and answers and the banter with that. And what he points out from all of his explorations that he's done around spirituality and so forth is, and it's true, as a marketer, I completely agree with this, right? It's experiences what people want, right? And everybody is seeking a way to become more connected to the friends, the family, the things that they love. But they're being hyper selective. And that's the challenges of marketing. But what does GPT and all these AIs, what are they giving us that? If we want to see more friends, are we getting more truth, more contact? And that kind of, I guess, more existential thought about what is the relationship between AI and humanity and where is it going to take us? I almost found more interesting to start pondering than what is the existential threat of the Terminator scenario. You know, he's out of all the people, man, he is a character. You know, one of the
He's
talks
a
he brings out, I could get us that basically we're just throwing frisbees and enjoying ourselves on taking some LSD. And he says, Burning Man. And you could see this guy likes Burning
yeah, he's definitely done a ton of psychedelics. He's done a lot
Man.
of spiritual explorations. He's a character. He's definitely a
Yeah.
character. Yeah, it's in terms of what he talks about. Let's go back to relationships. It's, yeah, what happens to us when maybe work goes away? What is a utopia? Looking on the positive side, what would that actually look like if we have a life without meaning anymore? What is the impact? If our best friends are now our AI companions, what does that do to human relationships and how we evolve and the evolution of our ethics as a species? It
Mm.
becomes very tangled up in who knows and who is defining those values and how are we expressing those values, how are we building these things in a way that will help with that when we're going in another direction in a lot of ways right now. Like we're seeing all these AI girlfriends pop up and all these things. It doesn't necessarily bode well for us as a society. And then on to the more existential threat. You brought up the example. There's kind of two examples he uses. One is the one you use. It's what happens when science accelerates faster than we can really understand it
Mm.
because of
Yeah.
AI and the impacts of that. We might be thinking we're curing cancer, but in curing cancer, there's some unintended consequence because we didn't actually understand that way of curing cancer, what it would actually do in some other sort of way to
Yeah.
us.
The
Like we
butterfly
can't
effect, right?
yeah, we can't predict that. And so there's this lack of explainability and transparency, as we all know. The second, people always bring up the Terminator idea. And in this space, in the existential threat, that is, if you went around and actually asked anybody if they think there's a Terminator scenario, pretty much 99% would be like, that's not the scenario I'm envisioning.
Right.
The scenario that people typically are envisioning is actually one of like where humans become the ants and AI becomes the human in
Yeah.
terms
So
like
yeah, he makes that analogy one of the
yeah,
talks.
so
It's
if I'm
really
building a highway to get from one place to another faster, I'm not going to care about the ants or the trees or the wildlife. I'm going to cut it all
yeah.
down. They're all going to die, and we're going to have our road. There is no animosity towards the ants. We're not even thinking about the ants,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't even cross our minds. And in terms of at least Sam's perspective, is this is the more likely scenario is that we build an AI or an AGI, it has some sort of goal, and in trying to achieve that goal, it causes us harm as humanity, not from any malice, not from any sort of I'm the Terminator trying to kill all humans. It's just I'm making a road, essentially, or whatever,
Yeah.
and you're in the way. So
And if you think of AI in the sense of this very logical and calculating millions of parameters to come to its decisions, it's going to make decisions based on pure logic. And I don't know why, but as we were talking, the thought that's struck me is we always talk about the Terminator, but nobody talks about Hal, right?
yeah,
Right? Hal in It's Alien, if I remember correctly.
HAL is in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh,
It's the
yes.
AI. It's the AI on the
On the
ship.
chip, yes, yeah, yeah, which is making the decisions for him. At some point, you would say, you know what? If it's better to shut off the oxygen, it's going to shut off the oxygen.
If you're trying to diverge from our mission, now you are a threat to my ultimate goal,
Yeah,
and so I'm going to turn off the
yeah,
oxygen.
and that to me, I think is the more, in a sense, likely way it could evolve, escalate, etc. Because we all know that we are lazy creatures, right? And the more that we can get the AI to do for us and so forth, the more people are going to be willing to accept it. And, and as the other characteristic that humans have is as you encounter something more and more day to day, you are less likely
Just become
to
desensitized.
yes, that's a better way of saying it. I was going to say see the flaws in it. I live with my kids day to day, and I definitely can see, and they can see my flaws. uh, But yeah, we're just going to be think, you know what, slowly putting on a few more inches, and suddenly you might end up in a whole different catastrophic state. And those are the things that these people are rightly calling out. And we've not intermixed thoughts across some of the voices that we've done. And I don't know if it will be published by the time we do this one, but Mo has a really interesting theory that I love, where he says, you want to slow this down? If money's driving it, let's tax these AI companies 98%, right?
Hmm.
So the governments here are going to be actually preparing for that utopia existence that might come around if that happens. And at the same time, you're slowing the pace of what the companies can do. It'd be an interesting conversation to see Sam and Mo have.
I bet they talk at some point.
Yeah.
I want to go back to literally use this example when we're talking about joy is the catalytic converter of it's actually going to cost us less money to keep it and just pay the settlement. I worry about a scenario like that with AI as it
Yeah.
grows more powerful is it makes this kind of calculation where it like values a human life at a certain amount of money essentially, and it makes a decision that causes harm to people that we weren't involved in that decision making.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a funny show. So I found it funny and
in
really
a
well done.
dark way.
Yeah, The Good Place. Have you ever seen The Good Place?
I haven't watched it though.
Okay, so one of the basically these people are up in heaven, and I say Sam Malone, but Ted Danson is as either the devil or the angel. Nobody really knows, as you go through some of the seasons.
Yeah.
Who cares for them? And one of the people in the situations is very much into philosophy. And they do this whole exploration of if there's a train and, do you divert it to hit three
The
people?
trolley problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, it's really well done. Yeah, what they keep doing. And I think, we're going to encounter that at some point, unfortunately.
We already have, right? Because you think about autonomous vehicles, there
Yes,
have
very
been
true.
deaths,
Yeah, very
and
true.
it comes down to this it comes down to the decision of the machine. Do I essentially potentially harm the person inside the vehicle, or do I harm the person outside the vehicle?
Oh, and is it a
And
child or is it an 80-year-old man? All those kind
yeah,
of things come
and
into
how are
play.
we tracking that decision making process, and then who is responsible for that decision? Because me
Yes.
as the driver, I
Yeah.
didn't make that decision necessarily. Maybe the answer is I program it myself, right? I get to decide what it does in that situation, but probably not. So, and if we can't tell how the machine made that decision, is it the machine who's responsible? If the machine's
Yeah.
responsible, does that mean does now the machine have rights? You need to bring the machine to court, or is it
Yeah.
the company? Like,
Yeah.
who's responsible?
We discussed it in one of our other episodes. I don't remember which one now, but it also timely, right? We've just started our new newsletter. Mine's called The Sync. Week 2 just went out.
Nice
Uh,
plug. Although it'll be
and
like week whatever when
yeah,
this
by the
comes out.
time this comes out. But we always try to choose a word of the week that connects to AI or machine learning, and this one was about black box models, and that's exactly what Joe's talking about here, right? And people have called this out as part of that existential thing. We don't have a very solid understanding of how these decisions are being made by the machines, right? It's not one math class where you had to show your work and then for us to be able to retrace. That's why I can't remember the acronym right now, but where it's the human reinforcement that is helping.
RLHF,
Yeah,
reinforcement learning for human feedback.
yeah. Thank you. That's why we have him on the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Call me the AI dictionary.
Without that being, so we can't see it, and without that being mathematical kind of show me the work that we grew up with, how do you reinforce it? And so we're only able to reinforce after the outcome is seen. And it's just like saying, okay, you didn't get 2 plus 2 is 4. I don't know where you went wrong, but let me try to show it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a hard reality that I think I personally don't understand why you can't program a machine to just say step by step, right? It was one of the key things in prompt engineering to say, think step by step. Why can't we tell it, show me step by step?
But it just comes back to the layer of abstraction there, because then we still don't know how it got to that step by step.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that does go a lot. I mean, I'm all about, I call it telemetry of thought. It's if it is making the decision based on what it's outputting first, then you can follow that thread a lot easier than if it just outputs the thing.
Yeah. And all
Show me
that
your work.
yeah, all that has very little to do with spirituality. And atheism, which Sam Harris is considered one of the four horsemen of atheism, what he's calling out and that existential threat and so forth has elements that revolve around some of the things that we just discussed. And he's an important voice.
Yeah, and I would say too, he's definitely controversial, but find some people that we've maybe talked about on this before that he's talked to. He does have very interesting conversations. And I would also dive into some of the conversations he has around consciousness too, because
Mhm.
something we haven't talked about here, but what happens if AI becomes conscious, whatever that means, or sentient? It's that just unfolds a whole other what he calls moral landscape for us to consider around we've brought something into the world that potentially suffers now, and it's like, how do we
Yeah.
deal with that,
Yeah.
you know?
And oddly enough, at that point, the Mogadat also calls out these machines will have feelings. It'd be very interesting to see those two. Maybe we should try to organize them on our show.
Yeah, yeah. If you're listening, guys, let's get Sam, Mo, Joy, and Sam all in one place. Okay, well, pleasure as always, Eldad. I'll see you in the next one.